All men are my children is a statement that he makes in separate Rock Edicts 1 and 2. But Kautilya is not far behind, as we shall see. He says, and the second bit is from Kautilya, the Arthashastra says that the king should favor subjects in distress like a father, should look into the affairs of the gods, sects, learned Brahmins, livestock, sacred places, children, the aged, the sick, the distressed, the helpless, and women, should give gifts, maintain those without relations, and discipline slaves. So the idea of paternalistic kingship is not only there in Ashoka's edicts, it is also there in the Arthashastra. What about non-violence? We noted that there is a difference in emphasis. According to Ashoka, the attitude towards all living beings that we should all have is one of daya or compassion, gentleness, sanyama or control, abstention from injuring, ahimsa, and abstention from killing, analambha. This I already mentioned earlier. But Kautilya also talks about ahimsa. He talks about ahimsa, satya, shaucha, anasuya, anrishamsya, that very important word, so important in the Mahabharata, kshama. And he says that these things are part of samanya dharma. And he also says that the Rajarshi, the sage-like king, should avoid himsa. So they seem to be agreeing with each other. They're saying that ahimsa is desirable. What about conciliation and the use of force? Well, for Ashoka, the focus is definitely on conciliation and exhortation, convincing his people about what Dhamma is, convincing them to follow Dhamma. But he also has a warning in that 13th Rock Edict, which talks about Dhamma Vijaya, which talks about, so movingly, about the horrible casualties and the death and destruction and the suffering that war creates. That very inscription creates a warning to the forest people that he will not tolerate any disturbance or problem that they might create. The Atavikas, the forest people, he threatens force there. Kautilya also talks about conciliation. He talks about how mantra shakti, that is the power of counsel, consultation, is more, it's a better way of getting what you want compared to Prabhu Shakti, that is the power of lordship, that is military might, and Utsaha Shakti, the power of energy. So there's this idea of the three Shaktis that the king has, and he says that the Mantra Shakti is superior to Prabhu Shakti and Utsaha Shakti. Many of you will know about the 4 upayas or the 4 expedients, Sama, Dana, Danda, Bheda. Sama is conciliation, Dana is generosity. In the political context, it can be bribery. Danda is force, Bheda is creating dissension. And out of all these upayas, surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, because I think Kautilya is a victim of his own notoriety. If you read the text carefully, you find there are lots of, something different is going on here. And he says that the king should resort to force, danda, only when the other upayas have failed. So he's talking about force as a last resort. And he warns against the excessive use of force, unnecessary use of force. And like Ashoka, he sees the Atavikas, the forest people, as a political problem, but he also sees them as an important military resource. Coming to punishment, Ashoka, as we've noted, talked about the importance of samata, or let us translate it as fairness, as far as the word samata is concerned. Kautilya also talks about how justice that is meted out by the king and the officers of the king must be fair. And he says that a king who metes out unjust punishment goes to hell. So both have the emphasis on fairness. And interestingly, both of them talk about a periodic release of prisoners. Ashoka claims to have done it many times, and Kautilya advocates a periodic release of prisoners on the king's birthday and other such, on various auspicious occasions. Capital punishment. We know from the fourth pillar edict that Ashok granted a 3-day respite to those accused of capital crimes. And that shows that Ashok did not abolish the death penalty. And the Arthashastra has plenty about capital punishment. In fact, it has a typology of death as a punishment, talks about simple death, which is called Shuddha Vadha, and death by torture, Chitra Vadha. So both are talking about capital punishment.